Hello, and welcome back to She's in Focus, the podcast dedicated to inspiring and empowering female filmmakers and videographers from all walks of life and on every step of their creative journey. I'm your host, Kel Grant, an aspiring filmmaker from New Jersey who's just trying to turn my passion into something more and connect with amazing women who have the same passion for video. One of those being Jocelyn Ontiveros, a Combat Mass Communicator for the 12th Marine Corps District, specializing in photography, videography, and writing. She has served since 2015 and is here to show us how women, particularly minority women, can make waves in male-dominated spaces and pave the way for other women to succeed. Jocelyn, thank you so much for being here. It is an honor to get to speak to you today.
Hey, Cal. Thanks so much for having me. It is my pleasure to join you here. This is a great project that I've been looking forward to be a part of.
Awesome. Well, first of all, I'd like to start off by saying thank you for your service.
Thank you so much for the support. It's humbling.
Of course. So, I want to hear your journey is fascinating to me because whenever I've heard about like armed forces or military careers, the creative aspect of that has never come into play. So I want to hear a little bit more about your role in your current occupational assignment. But why did you join the military? Let's start there.
Okay, so that's actually the funniest question I always get asked because I don't know why I joined. Usually people say, oh, you joined for citizenship because I was born in Mexico. No, I was already a citizen prior to enlisting. You're like, oh, you want to join for school? I had a full-ride scholarship to a private Christian university back in Arizona. Wow. So it's like those tangible benefits just weren't it for me. I think at the time it was a way for me to leave home and to explore something and do something that put me out of my comfort zone. And then ironically enough, when I joined originally, my job in the Marine Corps was supposed to be in the intelligence field. And then 2 weeks before going to boot camp, my recruiter tells me, hey, by the way, because of XYZ, we can only send you as combat camera, which was the very last choice I had picked when I was going through my stuff. And wow. I was very upset, but I said, you know what? I've been waiting months for this. Just send it. And it was a blessing in disguise. And this job was given to me like a silver platter. And a lot of people who want this in the Marine Corps wait years to be able to join with this particular field. And it's honestly the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Wow. So you join the military and you get your last choice job, but it ended up being kind of a big blessing in disguise there. So what does the job entail, and what was your first choice that you didn't get?
My first choice was in the intelligence field, and then my second choice was in what we call CBRN, which is a chemical biological, which is just basically dealing with training for chemical warfare.
Oh, okay. Wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, much different than camera op, right?
Yes, it's completely the opposite.
Right. So what is, because when I was looking at your work, it's like, I was wondering, okay, does this mean every kind of mission or event you're there with a camera? Are you taking like corporate military headshots? What is the job?
So it's a little bit of everything. So the way that the Marine Corps will put it, it's historical documentation, right? It's kind of like the photos and the videos you see of World War I, World War II, the famous flag raising in Iwo Jima. It's somebody who was in my field at that time. Wow. But the way that I put it now in a very blunt way is we got to tell taxpayers what we're doing with their money. Right?
Yeah. I'm sure they appreciate that too.
So yeah, basically, depending on the unit you're in, is will define the types of stuff you're covering. So previously to this, I was in the logistics unit. So we were covering a lot of delivering food and ammo and building bridges, right? When I deployed, it was a division, I was attached with the infantry, which was more patrols and ranges and buddy rushes, all that type of stuff, and then an extraction mission training. And then now that I'm here on the recruiting section of it is a little bit more showing the journey of what it takes to become a Marine. So it just changes based on where you're at. But I think at the end of the day, the message that we want to communicate to the public is why we Marines are different. So we have the slogan, the few and the proud. So whatever it is that we're doing, that's going to be the final message. Is like what sets us apart and why we train the way that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Which kind of category do you like best? Do you really enjoy the recruiting operations that you have now?
I think it's a little bit easier to focus on the recruiting side because it's a lot more of a controlled environment.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm able to set up the story the way that I want. I'm able to set up the interview the way that I want, talk to the people that I want. Whereas when I'm back when we call the fleet, which is basically in the base,
Yeah.
and these training exercises, it's you have to be on your toes because everything's happening at once, and you need to try to capture the entire thing, and it's a very uncontrolled environment. So you do get a lot cooler shots like that you see in the movies type of stuff, or on the social media, like the person jumping out of a ship, out of a plane, or the gunfire. It's a little bit more cool and appealing to the eye. But I think the stories over here are a little bit more niche and just a lot like more relatable to the public.
Got it. And so you get to do photo and video for these projects?
Yes. So when I came in, we were what we call public affairs, right? So that job no longer exists. We kind of like merged into one. And my specialty is photography.
Got it.
But we cross train, and they can send me to do video, even though I'm a photographer by trade, or they can even have me do some graphic design work. That's also part of our job field, is designing posters and logos and that sorts of stuff. And that's not my strong suit whatsoever, and I avoid that. Mm-hmm. I would say like the plague, but it doesn't really seem fitting anymore.
Right. Oh, wow. So, I mean, did you have all of these kind of tangible creative skills before you got assigned, or is a lot of the training on the job?
So I had never picked up a camera, quote unquote, professionally before the Marine Corps, right? You just had the point and shoot cameras for the family functions and everything, right? And I honestly was so upset with my recruiter. So I told my instructor, I don't want to be here. I'm not going to purposely fail because that's just not who I am, but I'm not going to try.
Yeah.
Right. And I got the second highest score in the class without trying. So imagine,
imagine if you apply yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. And then I get to my first unit, and I was taught just photo and writing at the time. And they're like, hey, we need you to go make a video. And I was like, what? Camera, video? I just know how to click the shutter for the photo, and that was it. Right. And I have no idea. They're like, they didn't teach you video? And like, no, they just taught me photo and how to write a story. That was it. And the sergeants, the NCOs that I had at the time were on transitioning out of the Marine Corps, so there wasn't a lot of time for them to train me on the video aspect of things. So I look back at my first videos, and they are a complete mess. Like the audio is messed up, the image is shaky, it's out of focus, it's super exposed, all sorts of like messed up things. And I was shooting in JPEGs when I was taking photos. Yeah, so you can imagine, like, that's how bad it was. And I was just dead set. I'm like, I don't really care because this is not really what I wanted to do.
Right.
And it wasn't until I got sent out on my deployment that I met, at the time, Staff Sergeant Philip Elsie, who's now out, and he actually sat me down and told me, like, you're going to learn how to do video properly and how to take pictures a better way. And he taught me basically all the stuff that I know now, and that's when I really fell in love with this job and with the things that you're able to do and the stories that you're able to tell. And at that time, it was more like on-the-job training with him coaching me through it. And then after that, it's just been more myself, like YouTube tutorials, courses online, and all that sorts of stuff. But past my initial training within the Marine Corps, it's just been on the job.
Yeah. So it really took kind of a dedicated mentor to be able to show you the ropes and show you what could be accomplished with your camera, to have you really fall in love with it.
Yes, exactly it.
That's awesome. So what kind of do you have a lot of creative freedom when you go out on these assignments, or do you kind of get a brief and you're like, okay, this is the job? Or is it more like, go to this event, kind of do with it what you will, or are they kind of expecting a certain output from you?
It's a little bit of both. So when you get the assignment, they're like, hey, this is what's happening, and these are our expectations. Like, this is the message we want to convey. And then we kind of have the freedom on deciding how we convey that final message. You do have like a chain of command basically that goes through the editing process. So like I would finish a video and they would go up to the next higher rank, he'd give me corrections, fix it, and then we take it to the officer in charge, which is the approving authority, and then more changes would happen, and then so on and so forth. but like they will brief you like, hey, this is what's happening. This is kind of what the commander's intent is. Go film this, and after that, you kind of build the story on your own. And it's about 60% creative freedom, 40% not creative freedom.
Yeah, I guess I was surprised when you said that it would kind of go through revisions and edits just like any other project. I mean, it kind of runs like an in-house production company when you think about it.
Yes, I think the longest project that I ever worked on, I started in September and I finished in December. Because it was going back and forth with revisions, because it was very graphics and After Effects heavy. So everyone's like, oh, that kind of glitched a little bit, and oh, that I don't really like that. But on top of that, it was a video documenting the history of one of the units. So we also had it sent into the historical section of the Marine Corps to ensure that all of the footage and all of the stuff that I was writing about was actually accurate, and that took a while to hear back from. But yeah, I started in like beginning of September and I finished like the first week of December, and that's when the video was published, and that's probably the longest project I've ever worked on so far.
Wow, that's awesome. So kind of illustrate for us the skill set you had when you started. It sounds like you were shooting mostly automatic JPEG format. You're just clicking the shutter when you have your shot in frame, to kind of the choices and the technical abilities that you have now in your career.
Yeah, I mean, it took a lot of trial and error, to be honest. And it was like pulling teeth with me at the time, because I was refusing to learn, because I was like, this is not what I wanted.
Yeah.
But after hearing stories of people saying like, oh, I've waited a year and a half to enlist because this job is only available like 2 to 3 openings a year. And it's very difficult. You need to have what we call a very high score, a ASVAB score, to be able to get it. And everyone's like, how did you get it without even trying? Like, it was a lot of resentment, and that kind of like pushed me. It's like, you know what, maybe I should look into this a little bit more.
Yeah.
And to the point where after I got back from the deployment, I actually invested in my very first personal camera. I bought a Sony A7R3.
Okay. And
then I started shooting mirrorless, and I started learning a little bit more, because with the Marine Corps we have a contract with Canon, so we shoot with the Canon 1DX for photo and the C100s for video.
Nice.
So it was a little bit of shifts of learning both, and now it's honestly great, because I've seen my work in many places within the Marine Corps, even just the civilian side of things. I actually found one of my pictures that I took when I was deployed in 9/11 and nominated for the photo of the year for the Marines at that time, in addition to being put in what we call like when we're separating from the Marine Corps, like the veterans book that teaches you kind of like how to transition. Like that photo is on that book.
Wow.
And it's kind of like those small things that make you like, you know what, it's really worthwhile, because like your name's kind of in history at that point. Yeah. And it's kind of pushed me to learn a little bit more. It's like, hey, you're not shooting automatic. You're actually going to take the time to capture the shot that you want as best as you can, so you don't have to do a lot of final edits, but actually learning how to work these programs with Adobe and Lightroom and edit these pictures to my creative ability. And at that time, that's what they allowed me to do. Especially for photos, it's a lot easier to have your creative freedom than with video.
Sure.
And then it's been a roller coaster of a journey since shooting automatic.
Yeah, that's a wild ride. But it sounds like, especially in that environment, that you kind of have to learn pretty quickly, because the photos and the video that you take, it's not just, being typically put into a database and never being seen. Like, these are the ideas that these photos and videos, show or represent a certain time in history, and they're to be kind of published and resurfaced. And I guess if you take pictures of, like individuals, do those photos get kind of like tagged and sent to them so that they have like personal access to those?
Yes. So, I mean, with social media nowadays, a lot of the work that we do is geared towards being put on social media. So it's kind of go everywhere. And not every picture that we take is approved to be put out, right? It's not approved for release to be released. So, and sometimes those are internal ones that are not approved to release because of X, Y, Z. I will ask some of the Marines like, hey, what's your email, so I can send these photos to you, because it's nice to look back and through the years of your service, whatever job you have in the Marine Corps, and see stuff that you're doing with your friends and whatnot, and just having that memory of that time, even if you were miserable at the time because you're in the middle of the desert and it's stupid hot.
Mm-hmm.
So for those individual ones, for those who want it, they're like, hey, here's my phone on my notes app. Just put your email on there, and then I'll just do a mass drop on my Google Drive, and I'll send them the link. And I'll be like, hey, this is going to expire in like 60 days, so make sure you download everything, and so on and so forth. And I personally do try to give those individuals pictures that I've taken of them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because it's not only, I guess, for the Marine Corps as a whole, but for the individuals that are serving it. It's got to be nice to be able to, even just in your own personal kind of flip book or Rolodex of photos, to have those memories. And it's really awesome that you have the opportunity really to capture that and kind of be part of the legacy that these Marines are putting forth. So I think that's really cool. I have a question for you. So how did you progress on the job? Because I was reading your bio, and it says that you became a social media assistant manager. Mm-hmm. So you started kind of as a camera ops person and then evolved into this. Tell me about that journey.
So at the time, being a social media manager usually is a job for what we call like a staff non-commissioned officer. So that's about an E6. So it's about 7 or 8 years of experience.
Wow.
And then just being an assistant is usually about like an NCO, which is about 4 to 5 years of experience at the time. And I've only been in the field at that point for not even a year at the time. And one of it is because our job field is very small. So for our unit at that time, it was myself and 2 other Marines for production, the senior enlisted advisor, and then the police authority, the officer in charge. So there was 5 of us in that office to cover an entire logistical unit. So it was at the time, hey, we also need assistance putting this stuff on social media, so that I would get all the projects and I would schedule them, and then they would just go in and like revise the caption or anything like that and give us something. And I did get sent out to do a social media manager's course. I once again paid for the Marine because they'll pay for all of my training, and it actually ended up helping me because out here, I am one of one in this particular job field and this marketing and communications role that I'm in. And I wore many different hats. So not only am I the production chief, basically, so making photos, videos, edits, I'm also the social media manager to do analytics, to do post. And I just not only manage like the recruiting in Sacramento, I manage the individual offices, and I have oversight about other 15 social media accounts on Instagram.
Wow.
So it kind of did help me to get that thrown into that role at a very young age in my Marine Corps career, because it's mostly what I do now. It's a big chunk of my day-to-day thing is just doing social media stuff, especially after COVID, and we rely so heavily for the recruiting side on social media.
Yeah.
That it's a big part of my role now, and it's. I don't hate it, but I do miss being out in the field and actually doing my original job, which is taking photos and making videos.
Got it. So have you taken, because you said you're really not out in the field so much anymore, and I'm not super familiar with like the structure of how your life as a Marine goes. So have you taken your creative talents kind of outside of your work with the Marine Corps? Do you do kind of film or photograph for fun on the side? Because I know you said you got a camera. Are you freelancing at all? What does that look like?
So I do for a lot of the Marines right now. And honestly, I just tell them like, hey, either pay for my gas or buy me lunch.
Yeah.
Is a lot of the stuff that I do for my Marine friends, right? So in July, I actually filmed a wedding. I didn't film, I'm sorry, I did photos for one of the Marines who got married. And I was like, hey, just pay me in food and give me gas money, and we'll call it even, right? So I have done wedding photos. I did a vow renewal last year. A couple of friends just wanted to do like model shoots and going out into the river and like stuff like that. And I freelance in that sense right now, just to kind of build up my portfolio, not really charging people money.
Right.
Just so I have both aspects of it for when I do decide to leave the Marine Corps. I have like my Marine Corps portfolio of what I am able to do, and then stuff on the side that I'm actually able to work on.
Yeah. So have you thought extensively about kind of when you would leave the Corps, what that looks like for you?
I said I was only going to do one enlistment, and here I am. I re-enlisted last year, 6 years in, and I don't know. My plan was to get out after my first contract, but then the pandemic hit, and I guess it might be selfish, but at the time it was like, well, I have a steady income if I reenlist, and health benefits, health insurance, and dental, and everything covered. When right now where we stand in the country is very like turbulent, and there's no guarantee that my job would be stable enough to pay me every 2 weeks or give me like benefits that I have right now. So I decided to just like bite the bullet and do another 4 years. And I guess we'll see where we are in 2024 when my contract ends again, and see if I decide to do another 4. I always said if I make it, if I go past 10, I have to finish because I could retire with 20 years in service.
Wow. At that point, yeah.
Yeah, at that point, I'm like, I'm halfway in. I already given 10 years. What's another 10 to receive full benefits, right? And
Definitely.
my retirement pay so we'll kind of see how that goes. But I can tell you my body definitely feels, has taken a toll and feels the 6 years in the Marine Corps that I've had.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about what the Marine Corps is like outside of just your specialization or your occupation. Do you have training? Is there ever a point, and this is going to sound kind of like stupid or ignorant, but I really don't know how any of this works. So at any point, like, can you be kind of called upon for battle? Like, how does that work? Because I'm guessing in order to get to the Marine Corps, you have to go through boot camp. So you're training like a Marine, even though you have kind of a creative specialty, right?
Yeah, so the way the Marine Corps operates is it says every Marine a rifleman. So we all go through the same initial training, which is boot camp, and then Marine combat training, which is we call MCT. After all of that, which is about 4.5 months of training, you go to your school, your specialty, your military occupational specialty, which is called MOS. But once you get to your unit, every year you have to do your annual requirements, which would be your physical fitness test, which is ran between January and June, which is a 3-mile run. Crunches and pull-ups and or push-ups, and then from July to December you have to do your combat fitness test, which is a 800-meter run in boots, and we call it boots and utes, which is like the cami trousers of boots, ammo can lifts in 2 minutes, and the maneuver under fire, which is basically sprinting and doing a battle, a buddy drag and a fireman's carry and sorts of stuff. Wow. In addition to, you have to go and qualify on the range to make sure you're proficient with your rifle. So those are the basic requirements that we have to do. And then aside from that, you're attached to what we call a deployable or non-deployable unit. So deployable means that, yes, you can get called upon to be like, hey, we have Marines leaving for a Marine Expeditionary Unit, a MU, or a Special Purpose MACTF Marine Air Ground Task Force. And then you get attached to that unit, and then you'll do your time overseas and whatnot. If you're in a non-deployable unit like I am right now, you stay here the entire time, and you can't get called into that deployment because your job is crucial in that sense that you have to stay here. So for us recruiting, we have to continue. Recruiting never stops. So my 3 years here, I cannot be called up to a deployment, but I still have to do my annual requirements for my PFT and my CFT. I don't do the range because we're not on a base. So there's no way for us to be able to have weapons and or go shoot the range, that the format that we have it. So we get an exemption for that. But for everything else, we still have to meet those annual requirements.
Got it. So you're not stationed on a base right now. So where are you?
Right now, I am in Sacramento, California.
Okay.
We have, as far as recruiting works, we have recruiting stations, and then the next echelon is a district, and then it's a region, and then it's a Marine Corps Recruiting Command. So because these recruiting stations are all over the country, you're not really on a base. You're on what we call an independent duty. So I work in an office building, right? Which seems like any other building that you would walk into. We still have our uniform that we wear every day and all that, but we're just not on a base.
Got it. So you're, do you find your own housing? I'm assuming they're supporting financially all of these endeavors, but you get to find your own housing, or do you live like in a community with other employees? So
when you get sent on independent duty, let me rephrase that. The way the Marine Corps works, if you're an E5 and below and you're not married, you do stay in the barracks or dorms, right? after you get promoted to an E6, you can get housing allowance, or if you're married, you also get housing allowance and get moved out. But if you're in that E5 and below, not married, and you get put on independent duty, like I am right now, you do also get an housing allowance because there is no base, there is no dorms for the Marines to live in, that you have to live out in town. So when I got here, they give me the housing allowance and the sustenance, like meal allowance, every month. And I am responsible of either finding an apartment, a house if I want to buy or rent or whatever the case may be. And I'm just financially responsible for all of that. Whereas if you're in a base, you don't really have to worry about anything because you're in a dorm room and you don't pay bills. And then you don't pay for your meals because you go to the chow hall, the cafeteria. But yes, when you get put out an independent duty when you're not on a base, they will support you financially in that aspect.
Got it. Thank you, by the way, for going through all this with me.
Of
I'm learning so much. So you said you're also now in a non-deployable unit, but I believe when I read your bio, you have been deployed before in your other kind of roles. What was that like? Where did you go? Walk us through that.
So I was with what we call a special purpose MACTAV.
Okay.
And I was deployed 9 months. So we went to the Middle East. Our base, basically, our base of operations, is in Kuwait.
Okay.
From there, because of the nature of my job, you do get attached to the infantry platoons and units, and you do get to go a little bit more places than anybody else who would be in that base of operations. So for me, I was able to go to Jordan, and I went to Iraq, and I went to Syria while I was out there. And it's rough being away from family, but it's you still have access to the internet. I got to sleep, and for the most of the times I was sleeping in a tent with a bed and AC and a heater, and I had food and I had indoor plumbing. So it's kind of one of those things where like you don't take for granted, right? Once you leave that compound, yeah, I did have to sleep in the sand, and my flak, my bulletproof vest was basically my pillow. No restrooms, and the only female with a bunch, like 20 or 30 guys, and all of that. But it was fun in that sense. I know it sounds weird because you're deployed and you can look kind of in the combat zones and whatnot. But thankfully, we didn't have anything happen while we were out there.
Yeah.
But just kind of like just being out there with the Marines, misery loves company, and kind of the stuff we do to keep ourselves into training and everything were kind of like the memories that are fun and that I remember.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, to even just have that experience at such a young age. I can't imagine you are that much older or younger than I am. I'm 24.
Oh, no, I'm 25, going 26.
Okay. That's so funny.
I joined a little late. So usually people join when they're 17 or 18. I was 20 when I came into the Marine Corps. So I'm a little older than most.
Got it. But so, I mean, like being in your mid-20s, you've had all of these experiences, and I guess, we're fortunate enough that they went well to the extent that some Marines that get deployed have a very different experience than what you had, I'd imagine. So, but it's just even to live through all of this and kind of like have these experiences under your belt in your mid-20s has got to be an incredible experience. But I am curious about, being a woman. What was your experience like in the Marines in a male-dominated space? And I mean no disrespect when saying this, but the armed forces hasn't always been so welcoming to diverse candidates. So what kind of walk us through like the good, the bad, and the ugly of navigating this space? Yeah,
no, it's a roller coaster, and you do have to fight for like your seat on the table basically, and fight for that respect. When I was deployed, I do remember at the time it was like, well, we're gonna send Corporal at the time Ontiveros with you guys to document and film everything, and they're like, well, she's a female, and they're like, well, we won't have like any separate housing for her or like any separate like indoor plumbing, and I'm like, what does that have to do with me being able to do my job? Like, what? Right. How is that relevant? Like, it doesn't matter to me. And they're like, whatever, fine, and then they'll relent. And once you show them that you can keep up with them, whether it's hiking, whether it's carrying your weight or whatever it is, they kind of like just leave you alone. And I was fortunate enough that I was able to do all of that to the point where when they were going out again, they would specifically request me to go with them. But it is a fight at first. I was supposed to go to Afghanistan, but they sent the male Marine, one of my counterparts, instead. And they're like, hey, we're going to replace you 30 days after he's done, and we're going to send you out there. And I was like, okay, cool. That never happened. One, because it's like, oh, we don't have any accommodations for the females, and stuff's already there and everything. I was like, well, I mean, why are you impeding me doing my job, having the opportunity just because I'm a woman? Like,
yeah,
it's irrelevant. Like, I was just like, I don't need a separate sleeping quarters. We're all going to be sleeping out in the field. We're all going to be using the outhouse, basically, or the porta-john. It's the same thing. Like, no one's showering because we don't have any showers. Like, what difference does it make? So to me, that was very upsetting, because at that time, the Marine that I was also a driver for, so the Sergeant Major, which is one of the highest rankings, had specifically worked out combat camera to go to Afghanistan because he wanted me to go. He did it for me. Yeah. And I didn't get to go. And he was not very happy about the fact that, like, I worked everything out for her to be able to go and have the opportunity and document. And it kind of was taken away from me. Yeah. And even aside from that, just picking up rank, being in charge of the Marines and being in charge of all male Marines, it is difficult, because, like I said, you have to fight for that respect at times. Like, not everyone's very opening. Everyone's upbringing is different. Everyone came from a different background, and they all have different cultural aspects and beliefs, and they don't always take kindly to change into differences. Yeah. The benefit is that you don't really have an option in the military. It's like they're in charge of you. You will listen to them, or else you will get punished. You will get in trouble. So it's in that sense, it's like you can't really fight that back too much. But it is frustrating at times when you're like, when it's frustrating at times when you're telling somebody to do something, or you're trying to mentor them and they just don't have that respect for you just because you are a woman. It is a lot more rare, but I have encountered it. Thankfully, I've been fortunate enough where I haven't had too many instances of that. But even for myself, I do find myself thinking, when I have had female leadership, and saying like, oh, she's such a bitch. And then I'm like, is she really? Or am I just feeling this way because it's a woman in charge telling me what to do? Would I be feeling the same way if it was a male who was in charge of me and telling me these things, right? So, and I think it just happens to all of us. And so I always try to stop myself and think, like, are they being unreasonable to the point where they really are just being quote unquote a bitch? Or am I just structured to believe that just because they're a woman empowered, they are more difficult to work with? And I think that's a slow change, and it is coming, not just in the Marine Corps and all the branches, but like all things, when you have like a culture that it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have to kind of confront these biases and these opinions, like you were saying, in ourselves. But also, it sounds like you just have to have a level of resiliency to be able to serve in the Marine Corps. Have there ever been a point in time where you were like, I'm out, like I can't do this anymore, and you really felt like throwing in the towel?
I did. So it's very, very, I'm going to be very open with you. I did have a mental breakdown when I was deployed, and it got really bad. I was, at the time, having suicidal ideations, right? Yeah. I was just going through a difficult point in my life, dealing with unresolved trauma. Being out in the middle of nowhere wasn't helping out. Just the stress of work. Frictions within my command and my leadership at a time because we weren't seeing eye to eye. It did get really, really, really bad. I have scars on my arms. I don't know if you can really see them, but everyone asking was like, "Oh, what happened?" It's like, "Oh, I got fighting with a cat." But no, it was self-inflicted at the time, and it got to the point where I actually went to one of my staff sergeants and I said, "Hey, I need help." And I pulled up my sleeve, and just like my arm and like my entire self was like bloodied out. Yeah. And after that, I was sent over to see mental health. And thankfully, I was able to get the help that I needed. I was going to see my therapist. I got some antidepressants, and then I got some sleeping medication because I wasn't sleeping either, so that wasn't helping my my well being. And then I still see mental health every now and then. I like once a month just to make sure that I'm doing okay. But I have been diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and PTSD. So it has been difficult. It does happen to some people, but I can say that I've been fortunate enough to be able to receive the help that I needed and be given the time and the space to sort of be able to take care of myself and put myself first.
Yeah, I mean, you're so brave to have gone through that and have the wherewithal to be able to say, I need help, and have the courage to ask for it in such an environment. I can imagine that was really challenging. What are some other, I guess, characteristics that you think that you possess that allow you to kind of survive in an environment like that? So I can imagine that you're resilient, right? That you're brave. Are there any other characteristics that you can kind of share with us? Just even for the women listening to this podcast who might be thinking, I want to join the Marines. I have some concerns. What qualities do you think they need to possess in order to succeed in an environment like that?
Oh, that's a tough one. Obviously, yeah, resiliency and knowing your worth. For me, it took some time to just be able to like, hey, like this is who I am, this is what I'm worth, and like, I'm not gonna let people just walk all over me. I am very outspoken and very blunt, and that's both a blessing and a curse, especially in the military, right? Because there's a time and a place to say things, and it has happened to me where I kind of just react and I say things, and whether I'm right or not, it's just the fact that I said it in the time and a place where it wasn't appropriate, or the tone that I was saying, it could have been misconstrued as being rude or belligerent. But I also believe that you do need to speak your mind, because just because someone's in charge of you doesn't mean they're always going to be right. And you're also there to help and mentor not only your peers and your subordinates, but also your superiors, right? We all have experience from different backgrounds. And the best thing to do is to share that experience and to be able to be open about it. So I think just being able to stand your ground is going to be very important. Whether you're a male or female, but particularly just being a woman in any workplace, just being able to say, this is what I think, and this is what I think should happen based on these factors, and I'm going to stand my ground and not let people talk over me or walk over me. And there has been times where I've been frustrated enough to be like, we're another sergeant male would interrupt me, and I was like, excuse me, like if you would listen to what I am saying, you wouldn't be having these questions because I'm not done talking yet. And it's kind of one of the things. yeah. So it's like don't stop interrupting me. Literally, that's also what I told him. Like, stop interrupting me. If you would listen to what I'm talking about and what I'm saying, you wouldn't be having these questions.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that thing is just like, at times you're like, I'm just gonna be quiet and walk away. No, like stand your ground, and people will think, oh, she's such a bitch, right? But it's gonna happen one way or another, and I think not caring what people think about you is also really important, because just prove yourself, like prove that you know your job and you know what you're doing, and whether people like who you are as a person or not, they'll respect your work ethic.
Wow. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's that question of what is it, whether to be loved or respected. I guess you'd rather be respected. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. So bringing it back to your role, right? Your occupation, your occupational specialty. Tell me what a typical day is like on the job. Every day, do you have an assignment? What does the day-to-day look like for you?
So when you're back in the fleet or a base, you have a shop about 3 or 4 Marines or on production, right? So I can go about a week without having a lot of work, and then I can go 2-3 weeks where I'm like a busy bee, just working every day, right?
Right.
It just depends on the time of year, it depends on your personnel, and it depends on the person in charge of you. My last unit, there was 6 Marines on what we call production, meaning that they'll be the ones to get sent out to do photos or videos and whatnot. I had 8 projects. Everybody else had 1. And when I asked my officer in charge, I asked her like, "What's going on? Why am I the only one being tasked out?" And she told me, and I guess it's a humble brag, but she's like, "You're my most competent and talented Marine, and you're the one that I trust to be able to accomplish these things." And I was like, "Well, thank you. That's great to hear." But I also need to get some sleep. I also need to be able to get some sleep and be able to take care of other things. So, and then now where I'm at, I'll come into the office around 8:30. I'll check my emails for about an hour and a half. Scroll TikTok for a little bit. Naturally, yeah. Go make my social media posts for the day or for the week, depends on what our target is, and then go through the 15 accounts that I manage, just to ensure that they're posting and that the stuff they're posting is appropriate, and then kind of check the analytics for a little bit. And then after that, it just varies on what we're doing. So for example, this past weekend, I was working Aftershock. So Aftershock was a 4-day rock festival. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I was working all day because I also do help coordinate events for recruiting purposes, right? That's also part of my job. So I'm also in sales and vendors and media relations and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So there'll be days where I have 4 or 5 meetings with vendors about potential partnerships. And then the next day I'll be traveling to my offices because I do have offices all over Northern California and Western Nevada. So currently, I cover 180,000 square miles just by myself.
Right.
So I don't know how familiar you are with the West Coast in California, but from in Sacramento, which is the capital, drive 3 hours south to Selma, Visalia, Fresno, and I can cross the state border to Nevada, and I'm in charge of Reno and Carson City. I've gone up to Redding, Chico, all that stuff, because I have an office in one of those areas that I have to visit at least once every 2 months, just to ensure that they're getting done training in social media, they're getting training in media relations, supporting them with photo and video content, supporting them as a female Marine, because we don't always have a lot of female recruiters, going out to their schools, doing talks, what we call class talks, doing table sit-ups, pull-up bar challenges, and just being a female, it just immediately draws in a crowd. It's like, oh, you're a female and you're a Marine, what's that like? So that's also some of the things that I support. So in this duty, I am busy 4 to 5 days of the week, and prior to COVID, I was working 6 to 7 days a week. It's a very rare job in my field, and it's the busiest you'll probably be working this type of job. When you're, like I said, when you're back on a base, you have a project on Monday and it'll be due on Friday, so you work on it then, and then you won't have a project for another week or 2, so you're just doing training, just watching tutorials, trying to get yourself better, doing your annual training online, mentoring your Marines. It varies on the nature of this job, because sometimes we'll have 4 to 5 projects and there's weeks where we have nothing.
Yeah. What do you kind of prefer? Or would it be kind of an in-between? You like being busy, but you also kind of like the assigned on Monday, due on Friday? Do you think there's a good balance?
I mean, sometimes I do like being busy because it just keeps me focused with my ADHD, and just being able to okay, just a list of to-do lists. But I also do miss just having one project at a time and being able to focus my entire attention and my energy into that. Whereas here, it's hey, I have a project for a video that I have to do on top of 20 other things that I also have to take care of. And it's a little more difficult. So I stay busy, but I'm not giving it my all to this one particular thing. Because if I do, there's a list of 40 other things that I have to drop in. That's kind of not how it is. So I do miss being back on a base and just being hey, you're going to go film this on Monday, and it's due by Friday. Do what you need to do. So that it's a little bit more freedom that way, and just to be able to work at my pace and have my devotion and my dedication to that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I can't even drive home the point enough that the experience that you've gained in the past several years is incredible. Because the knowledge you have of photo and video, and now social media, and kind of the recruiting side of things, which I guess presents itself the opportunity to be good at public speaking and managing people and things like that. It's such a well-rounded job opportunity, which I'm sure can be overwhelming and overbearing at times. But it's really cool to hear, from an outside perspective, to hear how much opportunity and kind of experience you're gaining in a field that I didn't even know existed before I met you.
Yeah, it's my resume is incredible after this.
Right.
To say I've just been doing all of this without a college degree. So
Yeah.
if I do get out, it depends on the company that I would want to apply. I have all of the experience. I don't have the degree, but it's just whatever. Sometimes they ask for the degree, sometimes they ask for the experience, so on and so forth. But it is a little sometimes overwhelming because, hey, you're expected to have the knowledge of somebody who has like a master's in marketing and business management as a 23-year-old, usually Marine corporal or sergeant, managing a bunch of like 100 Marines and trying to get all of this stuff done. So it's not for everybody. Like doing this part of the job within my field is not for everybody. And I've had Marines ask me like, hey, do you think I should go out there? And I'm like, honestly, no. Knowing your work ethic, knowing your priorities and how you react, honestly, I think it would just be best for you and your well-being and your mental health, and for the unit if you just chose to go somewhere else, because it is a little overwhelming. But it's fun. I definitely a lot of experience, and I'm very grateful for that, because my resume will be pretty well-rounded if I do decide to get out and I have all of this stuff to put on there.
Yeah, awesome. And it definitely sounds like it's not for everybody, but I think that goes back to like knowing your worth and knowing what you're capable of and understanding your own boundaries. I know, just hearing what you were saying, I know somebody like myself would not do well in an environment like that. So I think kind of just doing your research, but also I don't know. I had an ex who went into the Marines, and a lot of his time was spent just talking to not only recruiters, but other Marines that have served or are serving, just like getting that experience. Because maybe hearing from one person, might not be the decision maker, but kind of getting different perspectives and hearing from other people who have had the experience is really helpful, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and like, I'm not a recruiter per se.
Right.
So my job is not to sell the Marine Corps. So whenever I do my visits and one of the potential applicants will ask me questions, I tell the recruiter, like, I'm not going to lie to them.
Yeah.
It's like any other job, the way I put it. You have your good days and your bad days. You have your good leadership management and you have your bad leadership and management, right? And you have peers that you get along with great, and you have others that you cannot stand, and you have that work drama. It literally is just like any other job that you're going to have, except you're wearing a uniform, right? And you have a little bit different sets of rules. But you can't expect to go into the military and have it solve all of your problems, right? And that it's going to just be sunshines and rainbows, because it's not. And sometimes, like, yeah, life is going to be great and you're going to have a great time of your life, and then you're going to be told to do something you don't want to do because it's on a weekend and you're supposed to have the day off, and now you're working through a holiday, or you're getting sent down to 29 Palms for a week and you're in the desert and you haven't showered and stuff like that. But then you also have really great opportunities to go do things that most people won't. Like, you get to travel a lot. You get to meet all these different types of people. You get to go to sometimes work security and conventions and get in for free. Someone's always offering to buy you a beer. So if you want free alcohol, there's that.
Right.
But it is, yeah, talking to different people. But I guess I would say is, like, don't let those people's... I guess how would I phrase it? Don't let those people's experiences, like, be your final decision on whether you want to join or not. Because, like I said, everyone's going to have a different experience, and everyone's going to portray that experience differently. There's been a lot of times where, like, the Marine Corps, I'm just like, oh my God, it's just very frustrating. And I could just focus on all the negative things and all the stuff that, like, I didn't want to do that I ended up doing, and just talk about that, or just kind of tell you about all the great things that I've got from the Marine Corps and paint you this pretty picture, like, that the Marine Corps is, like, the best thing that ever happened next to sliced bread. But it's both. It's both. It's like any job, and that's with any branch, whether you do Army, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard. They're not really a branch, but and then the shade, and then now the Space Force. So yeah, it's and then if you're a woman looking to serve, whether it's like the Marine Corps is probably going to be the roughest branch, to be honest. But whether you go Marines, Air Force, Navy, whatever you choose to do, just know that you're always going to be the minority. Always. There's been times where it's just me, I'm the only female in that section, or I'm the only female up until like a month ago. I was the only female in the office of 20 Marines, right? You're always going to be one of one or one of two. So it just really is being able to know your worth and to stand your ground, because being in such a male dominated space and all that testosterone can be a little intimidating and frustrating, and you just have to let them know like they're not going to walk all over you just because you're a woman.
Yeah, definitely. I think it comes down to like understanding and mentality and setting your own expectations, right? If you can't necessarily go in there and expect that, this is how things have been for hundreds of years, and now me being in here is going to change everything, right? No, it's like my act of being a female in the Marine Corps is helping the cause, but it's like I can make change directly to the people I'm reporting to, or the people that are reporting to me. But I don't know, I guess thinking that you're going to kind of structurally change the Marine Corps just by your existence, I think can be probably like a toxic mindset to have. So if you're, I guess, would you agree that if you're a female and your reason for joining the Marine Corps is to, like, I don't know, increase female representation or to structurally change things, like, do you think that that's an unrealistic expectation?
Yes and no. So I actually had this conversation with one of my, she's not really in my Marine because she doesn't fall directly under me, but I met her when she was in the delayed entry program to become a Marine. Mm-hmm. And she called me yesterday, and she's just having a rough time back in her unit. And she's like, that's why I joined. She told me, because I want to change things. I don't want the things that happen to me or the way that I'm being treated to happen to other people, or et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, I get that and I respect that, but I told her, you have to remember that just making structural change by yourself is not going to happen overnight. And I've always said, and I told her, your legacy, the change that you made, your legacy is going to be based on the Marines that you led and how they remember you and the difference that you made on them and as a person. Because realistically, you're just another dot in the Marine Corps history, right? And the Marine Corps is not going to remember you. Like, who is Sergeant Ontiveros? It's nobody in the Marine Corps history, right? Unless you're a Medal of Honor winner, like, you really are not going to be anybody to make that bump and like be able to stop and be like, oh, that's the person that really mattered in this point of history. It's brutal, but it is what it is. What's going to matter is how people remember you and the people that you worked with and how you help them, how you change them, and how you mentor them. So you can be somebody who's just very disgruntled with the Marine Corps, but you take care of your Marines, and that's what's going to matter, because those people remember you as somebody that help them in rough times, that mentor them, that paved the way for them. And that's going to be your legacy. And that's the change that you want to make, because maybe those people will stay in longer and they'll remember the stuff that you taught them and pass it on to the younger Marines. And maybe they'll get to a position in leadership where they can make that institutional change, right? And it's such a long and small domino effect. But it really realistically, if you want to make a change and a difference, you're going to join and you're going to make a change to your peers, right? Wow. The difference that you're going to make as a woman is showing the people around you that you can do it, that you have what it takes, and that you're worthy. And I've encountered this being out here in the recruiting section, because one of the officers is an infantry officer, and he has mentioned that he had one of the first females who was going into like the infantry combat training, and he said, yeah, I didn't think she was gonna make it, but then she put on that pack. It was 90 pounds, and then she hiked the 4 miles with us, and she was in the front of the line, and like never one stop, and she was actually pushing people and this and that. And then just having the conversations with him, he has said like, yeah, actually, I was very sexist and had a very opinionated against women serving in those combat roles, until I was able to see them in action, and meeting these females, myself included, has changed his point of view, right? Wow. And that's the stuff that matters, because he is going to go back and be a leader of Marines. And when he encounters that friction, he's going to be able to step in as a person with power and leadership and put an end to that and be able to teach those people, right? So it's not going to happen overnight. It's how you influence those around you.
Absolutely, 100%. Tell me about your favorite project that you've worked on.
Favorite project that I worked on was the one that took like 4 months for me to be able to approve, because it was just a very great opportunity for me to like expand on my knowledge into After Effects and graphic stuff. So,
wow, yeah, definitely. After Effects is something I used to like avoid at any cost, and then I actually went into the program recently, and I was like, okay, like this isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, but I'm definitely not an animator, but I can at least navigate my way around the program. So that's a really good and useful skill to have. What is your most proud moment?
Oh, my most proud moment.
Your proudest moment, I guess. I don't know if that what I said was grammatically correct, but
yeah. I think it's anytime my sister calls me, because she calls me the perfect sister, and so does my brother, even though I'm not perfect. Because like they're like, yeah, my sister's a Marine, and every time they meet somebody who's like, oh, blah, 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 like, oh yeah, my sister, she's a Marine, and I haven't done anything great or worthwhile to be like this amazing person, but to them that's important. And then, like I said, I'm 25, my brother's 15, my sister's 12, so they're like my kids, and I think my proudest moment is just being a good role model to them.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm sure they really look up to you too, which is really nice. What has been your most challenging project?
Most challenging project would have been doing a video on distracted driving, because I came into work on Monday right after lunch. I was looking on Facebook and I see this things like, oh, I can't believe you're gone, about one of my friends, and I was like, what happened? And I go online and look it up, and I see a news report for a car accident where a Marine was killed in a hit and run. And then crying my eyes out and everything, my boss comes up and she's like, hey, the general wants a video before the holiday Thanksgiving about reckless driving, because Marines we want them to not drink and drive or text and drive and all these sorts of stuff, and be safe during these holidays. Yeah. And I was like, can somebody else do it? And she's like, no, I want you to do it. And I was like, oh man, this is really hitting home for me right now. Yeah. And it was a Monday. The video was due Wednesday morning. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah. So on Tuesday morning, I went and with another Marine kind of filmed the entire thing, and then in the afternoon put it all together, turned it in. Wednesday morning, it showed to the general, made a couple changes, and then it got sent out. And it got picked up by a couple campaigns about distracted driving, not just within the Marine Corps.
Wow.
But yeah, it was very difficult for me to be able to focus and just be able to do my job at the time, because I was still like grieving the death of one of my friends.
Yeah. That's super challenging. But I always find that those projects that kind of hit home the most, or like the hardest to do from like an emotional standpoint, end up being some of the most rewarding things that you produce.
Yeah, it's actually one of my top videos that I have made, and it's still used as something that gets posted during some of the holiday seasons. It's like, hey, make sure you're being safe.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, do you have any exciting projects coming up that you're looking forward to?
Right now, no, unfortunately not. I just have been busy traveling and taking care of my mom. But I think the last project that I did work on was a video of one of the first females to train in the recruit training in San Diego. Went a little bit viral, and it got picked up by the Department of Defense, and then it just kind of went all over the place. So that was the last project I'm working on. So it's the last video on my page, so if you want to take a look at that. But for now, just traveling 3.5 hours south next week. It's about my next big project. Unfortunately, this job doesn't allow me to do a lot of photo and video at the moment.
That's okay. I mean, we'll be on the lookout for whatever you're producing in whatever way that is. So where can we find you on social media? And
social
other
media.
ones?
So it's Framing Jocelyn, like a picture frame. And then for anything military related, you can also find me on Divids, DVIDS hub.net. And then just search my name, Jocelyn Ontiveros. And that's where you can also see all of the stuff that I produce for the Marine Corps, and that's where it gets archived. But I'm pretty active on my Instagram and my social media, so that's probably the best way to find me.
Great. My final question for you, Jocelyn, is how can the viewers and listeners of this podcast support you as a filmmaker, but more so just in general too, just as a woman in the Marines? We have a network of female filmmakers. How can we support you at this time?
I think the best thing right now is to, with whether you're a filmmaker or not, is to not just me, but in general, give women a platform if you have it, and allow them to utilize that in order to be able to share their work and their experiences without needing anything in return, right? Because everybody's experiences, everyone's platforms are different, and just being able to share that space with women filmmakers and aspiring filmmakers, I think it's just going to be able to assist us, because unfortunately, when we're trying to get work, usually it's like you have a female and a male. Typically, people will try to work with like a male filmmaker. So just being able to allow them to have that platform and give them that space to grow, I think it's going to help not just me, but all of the women in this environment.
That's an awesome message. Jocelyn, thank you so much for sharing your story today. I mean, I've learned so much, and I know our listeners are going to gain so much value from this. I can't wait for people to connect with you on social media. You and I will hopefully definitely stay connected. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next episode. Bye.